Sonny Boy. Written by Al Pacino and published in October of 2024 by Penguine Press, with a snippet read by Richard Coombs. Available for checkout right now at the Alice L. Pendleton Library. I was performing since I was just a little boy. My mother used to take me to the movies when I was as young as 3 or 4. She did menial work and factory jobs during the day, and when she came home the only company she had was her son. So she'd bring me with her to the movies. She didn't know that she was supplying me with a future. I was immediately attached to watching actors on the screen. Since I never had playmates in our apartment, and we didn't have a television yet, I would have nothing but time to think about the movie I had last seen. I'd go through the characters in my head, and I would bring them to life one by one in the apartment. I learned at an early age to make friends with my imagination. Sometimes being content in your solitude can be a mixed blessing, especially to other people you share your life with. The movies were a place where my mother could hide in the dark and not have to share her Sonny Boy with anyone else. That was her nickname for me, the one she gave me first, before everyone else started calling me Sonny too. It was something she picked up from the movies when she heard Al Jolson sing it in a song that became very popular. It went like this: "Climb up on my knees, Sonny Boy. Though you're only 3, Sonny Boy, you've no way of knowing, there's no way of showing, what you mean to me, Sonny Boy." It stuck in her head for a dozen years, and at my birth in 1940, the song was still so vivid to my mother that she would sing it to me. I was my parents' first child, my grandparents' first grandchild. They made a big fuss over me. My father was all of 18 when I was born, and my mother was just a few years older. Suffice it to say that they were young, even for the time. I probably hadn't even turned 2 years old when they split up. The first couple of years of my life, my mother and I spent constantly moving around, no stability and no certainty. We lived together in furnished rooms in Harlem, and then moved into her parents' apartment in the South Bronx. We hardly got any support from my father. Eventually, we were allotted $5 a month by a court, which was just enough to cover our room and board at her parents' place. Many years later, when I was 14, my mother took my father to court again to plead for more money, which he said he didn't have, and which we didn't get. I thought the judge was very unfair to my mom. It would take decades for the court to have some sense about a single mother's needs. To find the earliest memory I have of being together with both of my parents, I have to go back to when I'm about 3 or 4 years old. I'm watching some movie with my mother in the balcony of the Dover Theater. The story is some sort of melodrama for adults, and my mother is totally transfixed. I know I'm watching something that's really meant for grown-ups, and I imagine there is a certain thrill in that, in being a little kid at my mother's side and sharing this time with her. But I can't quite follow the plot, and my attention wanders. I look down from the balcony into the rows of seats below us, and I see a man walking around there looking for something. He's wearing the dress uniform of an MP, the military police, which my father served in during World War II. He must have seemed familiar because I instinctively shouted out, "Dada!" My mother shushed me. I didn't understand why. "How could you say shush?" I shouted for him again. "Dada!" She kept whispering, "Shh, quiet!" Because he was looking for my mother. They were having problems, and she didn't want him to find her, but now she had been found. When the film was over, I remember walking out in the dark street at night with my mother and father, the marquee of the Dover Theater receding behind us. Each parent held one of my hands as I walked between them. Out of my right eye, I saw a holster on my father's waist with a huge gun pouring out of it, with a pearl-white handle. Years later, when I played a cop in the film Heat, my character carried a gun with a handle like that. Even as a little child, I could understand. That's powerful. That's dangerous. And then my father was gone. He went off to the war and came back, but not to us. Later in life, when I was acting in my first Broadway show, my relatives from my father's side of the family came to see me. I was this young avant-garde actor who had spent most of his life in Greenwich Village and gradually worked his way onto Broadway. After the show, a couple of my aunts and a kid or two of theirs paid me a surprise visit in the hallway backstage. They started to shower me with kisses, hugging me and congratulating me. They were Pacinos, and though I knew them from making the occasional visit to my grandmother on my father's side, I was somewhat bashful. But as we made small talk, something came up in conversation that struck me to the bone. They said something about the time that you were with us. I said, "What do you mean? When was I with you?" They said, "When you were with us, remember? Oh yeah, Sonny Boy. When you were hardly more than a baby, not quite a year and a half old, you lived with your grandma and grandpa, your daddy's mother and father." I said, "How long did I live there?" "About 8 months," they said. "Nearly a year." And suddenly things started to come together in my head. I was taken away from my mother for 8 months while my father was away in the war. But I wasn't sent to an orphanage or put in a foster home. I was mercifully given over to a blood relative, my father's mother, my grandmother, who was an absolute gift from God. I have had lifesavers throughout my time on this planet, and she was perhaps the first.